Well, it's week 11 that we're heading into right now. And, someone pointed this out to me yesterday when I did my wide receiver rankings. They said, you're a lot higher on Cedric Tillman than most people are in the fantasy football community, but you're not as high as you should be. And I thought to myself, honestly, when I was ranking, my wide receivers this weekend and also for rest of season, I actually found myself kind of thinking that to myself. I was like, I don't know if I'm as high on him as I should be. I think Cedric Tillman is about to have, I think, first of all, if you look at the last 3 games with Cedric Tillman, let's just pull it up right now. Cedric Tillman the last 3 games has been pretty outstanding, and, all 3 of those games were with Jameis Winston. Jameis Winston and Cedric Tillman. What they're doing right now with Cedric Tillman in a half PPR format, 14.1 fantasy points, pretty solid game, 25.4 fantasy points, 16.5 fantasy points. Now, again, this is with Jameis Winston, and honestly, I think there's a good reason for this one right here, because if you think about it, both of those guys were on the second-team offense. Both of those guys were on second-team offense. Not either of those guys was originally first team. Like Cedric Tillman didn't do anything until they traded away Amari Cooper, basically. That was when he first started doing well in fantasy football, is when they traded him away to the Buffalo Bills. And then he became in the lineup. And then Jameis Winston was also thrust into the lineup as well. So they had already had tons of practice time on that second-team offense. I believe that's what's actually been at play here. Because Jerry Jeudy's been a first-teamer, Elijah Moore's been a first-teamer, and then Cedric Tillman came up with Jameis Winston off of the second team. That's food for thought for you guys. So that's why I believe personally that, especially in a matchup versus New Orleans, who's bad against, they're bad defensively anyways. I just think it's going to continue. Out of the bye week, I have a lot of confidence in Cedric Tillman, but this is definitely an interesting one to see about, because like someone told me, I think people think that I'm too low on Tillman, but apparently I'm higher than consensus, and I guess we'll see how this one plays out. But appreciate y'all being here. Like the video, subscribe to the channel to show your support, and let's just go ahead and start answering some of your questions tonight. Nick LaFleur, what's going on? Do I start Tillman or Josh Jacobs at flex? Well, I'm going to tell you to go Cedric Tillman, because Cedric Tillman was a must-start for me. If you haven't seen the must-start videos that I've been making for about a month now at this point, I would say go watch this one. Cedric Tillman is a must-start for me this week because I believe that he's being undervalued right now. I think that his value is a lot higher than people really think. And Josh Jacobs, I get it, obviously with the big name, and the matchup against the Bears I don't particularly love, but the Bears have been bad defensively for a few weeks now, and the Packers are coming out of a bye week. I'm just going with Cedric Tillman. I think his ceiling is really high. His matchup is better. Cedric Tillman, to me, is a great play this week. Brian03, what's going on, man? Good to see you in here tonight. Nippy3166. Kind of curious, you think I keep Tillman or sell? I mean, honestly, this kind of just, depends on how your league values him. Because if your league mates are anything like the majority, I mean, this is a good example of what I was just saying. A lot of you guys were telling me in the comments of yesterday's wide receiver rankings and the rest of the season rankings, a lot of you were telling me I'm higher than consensus on Cedric Tillman. When you watch other fantasy YouTubers, they're not as big on Cedric Tillman as I am. And I find it interesting. I think I'm usually kind of like that with certain guys. I was big on Chuba Hubbard all 2024. I was so big on, he was my most drafted player this year on Underdog, and I'm doing really well in a bunch of best ball leagues because of it. So I'm just kind of early on some of these guys. Also, definitely wrong. That's why we have a segment right and wrong. But to me, if you look to sell him, I don't think you're going to get value that's equivalent of what you should be getting. So for me personally, I would probably rather just hold on to Cedric Tillman, because I don't see anybody in my own personal leagues giving me value. So unless you can get equal value, and for me personally, he's a top 20 wide receiver rest of season. So I'm looking for somebody in the range of maybe if you could get a Nico Collins right now, that'd be fantastic. You probably wouldn't be able to do that though. If you could get a Devonta Smith, I might do it, but I might lean Tillman. Pickens is close. Pickens, I might lean Pickens. But, I mean, other than that, like, I'd probably just end up holding on to him, to be honest with you. Eric Waller, what's going on? Breece Hall, Jonathan Taylor, Chase Brown need 2. Pickens, A.J. Brown, Nico Collins, Garrett Wilson, pick 2. Okay, so Breece, JT, Chase Brown. I will go with Breece and Jonathan Taylor. Yeah, they're playing each other this week, and some people get a little bit weird about that. I don't personally mind it. Like, for example, I just played Tyron Tracy Jr. and Chuba Hubbard last week. They were playing each other, and they both did really well. Like, just because they're playing one another doesn't mean that it's a bad thing. I don't really stray away from that. I just think that, like I said, you know, even today when I was doing the rankings, the running back rankings, I was still getting people that were mad. You know, people were still getting mad about my ranking for Chase Brown. And it's like, guys, like, this is not a good matchup. And I get it. A lot of people, I do understand it, because it is, you know, there is a reality with it, which is like, Chase Brown has done really well. So, you know, I get where people are coming from, but that's just kind of how I feel about Chase Brown. I like him, but not as much as I like Breece and Jonathan Taylor. And then Pickens, A.J. Brown, Nico Collins, Garrett Wilson. Well, if Nico plays, I'm playing Nico and A.J. Brown. If Nico doesn't play, I'm playing A.J. Brown and Garrett Wilson. I like Pickens too, but I just think Garrett Wilson's just kind of a more consistent. He's just a consistently better player at this point. So yeah, I do think that he's in good position this week. So yeah, if Nico plays, I'd play Nico and AJ though for sure. Brian03, what's going on? Appreciate the super chat. Looking to move on from Brian Thomas Jr. Any advice? Yeah, you know, I find this one really interesting as well. Because, okay, let's just go through what Brian Thomas Jr. has been. Wide receiver 11 in a half PPR format, currently averaging 11.5 fantasy points per game. Brian Thomas Jr. obviously kind of started out relevant, and then he got hot for a period of time. For a good month between like mid-September to like mid-October, and then, you know, he's cooled down ever since. And, you know, that was even with Trevor Lawrence, that he's had bad games with and without Trevor Lawrence. Now, the problem moving forward is that there isn't going to be Trevor Lawrence. Like, they're considering, like, just shutting him down. And they already rolled him out for this week, so I wouldn't shock me if, like, we see official word, they're shutting him down. And I'm telling you right now, if Mac Jones is his quarterback, I'm pretty sure I could do better for Brian Thomas Jr. than Mac freaking Jones. So, yeah, it just, that one doesn't make sense to me. People who are, like, really big. I got flack for that one, too. Like, when I did the rest of season wide receiver rankings on Monday, people were all over me. I was like, he's got Mac Jones throwing the ball. So, but that's a good thing to know, is that there's people out there that still really like him and still value him at this price. So for me personally, I'm shooting for the stars on this one. I'm trying to get a Zay Flowers. I'm trying to get a Jaden Reed. I'm trying to get a Darnell Mooney or Malik Neighbors. Now again, some people may not do that because of the fact that he has been worse. Like the past 2 weeks and without Trevor Lawrence, there is definitely going to be more of a hesitation with Brian Thomas Jr. moving forward. But if you act now, and if you do it really quick, because this is one you can't wait. You can't wait on this one. You got to do this really fast to maximize value, because it's only going downhill from here. So for me personally, you know, Brian Thomas Jr. makes a lot of sense to try to go after Mooney, Zay Flowers, Jaden Reed. If you can't get those guys, I'm okay with getting a Marvin Harrison. I'm all right with getting a Jackson Smith-Njigba. Not my preferred target, but I'm fine with it if that's what I have to settle for. I will take Jackson Smith-Njigba over him. Marvin, yes. Pickens, yes. Ladd, yes. Devonta Smith, yes. If you can get him for Nico, that'd be fantastic. I don't think you will, though. Josh Downs at this point, probably not. But you've got a good list of guys there. Like, because that's the thing, is you'd probably want to replace him with a wide receiver if you did. Or if you do want just like a running back that's flexible, Chase Brown would be fantastic to target. I think DeAndre Swift, maybe trying to buy him and hope that he exceeds without Shane Waldron. I think that's also another good option. I think that's probably what I'm looking at, though. Brian Robinson Jr. probably do a good one here. So, yeah, I think that there's several things that you could do here, and there's definitely people that value him more than I do for sure. So your options aren't dead. That's the one thing I'll say is go out and explore a little bit on this one. Appreciate the Super Chat. Super Chats are how you get your question answered immediately. Adam Smith, what's going on? Appreciate the Super Chat, man. Pick one, Tyreek, Adams, or Tillman. It's tough. Like I'm going to go with Tillman this week. Now, Tyreek is obviously in a very, very tough spot right now. I've talked to people on both sides of this one. There's a side of people that think he's going to be fine and he will pop off at some point. And then there's a side of people, which I'm on this side. I don't think he's going to pop off. I think this injury is, really going to affect him. Just look at what happened the other night. He was not the central part of their game plan like he always is. And even with scoring a touchdown, he had 9 fantasy points. That's not good enough. So I don't think his upside is more than 15 points at this point. I really don't. I don't see 20-point upside from Tyreek. Devontae is not a bad play. People gave me grief when I didn't put him inside the top 30 this week. It's not because I don't think he's a bad, it's not because I think he's a bad play this week. I really do think that he's going to be a solid play. I just don't see, upside. With Tillman, the upside is there, man. Tillman this week, I'm telling you, his upside is top 5. Versus the Saints, they're bad against wide receivers. He's been excellent with Jameis and without Amari Cooper. This one makes a lot of sense to me. Yeah, I'm going to go with Cedric Tillman. Appreciate the Super Chat. Alexis Bolanos, what's going on? Appreciate the Super Chat. Start Douglas or Myers? I've got to go with Jacoby Myers. Jacoby Myers, I said this on the rankings too. I don't think people are appreciating how good he actually is. That's a really good fantasy player. He's really solid. I mean, that's a guy that you can rely on to get you a solid 15, 14, 13, 17 fantasy points. He may never get you a 30-point explosion because he's not that player and he doesn't have those quarterbacks to do it. But that doesn't mean that he's not going to give you solid and very consistent production. Now, with Demario Douglas, I think that he is the best wide receiver option in fantasy out of New England, but that doesn't mean much. Demario Douglas, up to this point, his upside has just been very inconsistent. Demario Douglas had one 18-point game, but outside of that, his best game was an 11.3 fantasy point performance, and those were the only 2 double-digit games in half PPR. That's just not good enough. Whereas Jacoby Myers without Devontae Adams, Jacoby Myers has been very, very consistent. Jacoby Myers since week 3, 17.7, 7.4, 10.2, 14.2, and 14.5 fantasy points. This guy's getting you consistent upside. So yeah, I mean, it just makes more sense to go with Jacoby Myers. Appreciate the Super Chat. Tyler Sperry, what's going on, man? Appreciate the Super Chat. Start 1. Judy, Bear, Downs, or Dell? Bear. I don't know who Bear is. You'll have to clarify that one with me. Judy, Bear, Downs, or Dell? Well, I'm not going to go with Judy because I still like Downs better, even though he has Anthony Richardson this week, which, by the way, I also predicted could happen as well. Them switching to Anthony Richardson does not shock me. I mean, Joe Flacco's been horrible since he took over. Let's look up Nico Collins. What did he do in practice today? Nico. Can't find anything on his practice report. Let's read this really quick. No setback with Nico. That was just a game time call. I anticipate him practicing this week. I mean, he should return. I mean, I would be shocked if Nico doesn't play this week. So I don't think that we're gonna have an issue with that this week. I'd rather play Downs over Dell, even with Anthony Richardson. Tank Dell is a disaster. That guy's just not very good. Like, he's just not a very good player. So especially with Nico back, like, I just don't see it. There's an outside shot that he could be a better option moving forward with less pressure. But one thing's for sure, that's not a wide receiver one. Let's get that straight. Bear, yeah, I've got no idea. Bateman, okay. I see what you commented. Yeah, Bateman's not a bad play ever. But like I said earlier, I've said this all week so far. The one problem I see with Ravens wide receivers in particular is that, like, if you just look at, like, the last like month for sure, Zay and Rashad Bateman both have upside, right? So Zay isn't always, like, the dominant number one. And this is, I'm telling you guys, I've been watching this matchup for years. Even though the Ravens are elite offensively, this will turn into a slugfest. It is who has the bigger balls. This matchup is never big on points. So, I do expect this to be more of a ground and pound game with less upside from receivers. I'm going to personally go with Downs in this one. Bateman's a fine play in a lot of other weeks. I don't particularly like him this week. Appreciate the super chat, Tyler. Next up was Scano6839. What's going on? Appreciate the super chat. PPR, Hall Tillman for AJ Brown, JK, got Kupp, Kyron, and Devonta Smith. So you're sending Hall and Tillman for AJ Brown and JK Dobbins. You already have Kupp, Kyron, and Devonta Smith. Man, I mean, obviously getting AJ Brown is fantastic. I'll tell you what gives me a little leeriness with this one is that J.K. Dobbins, the problem with him right now, a player that I've liked all year. Like, in fantasy, he's been one of my favorite players this year. But there is a problem with this one. Gus Edwards in his first game back, like, he did some work. He did some work, man. So with Gus Edwards, I just don't think that this is like an easy, smooth sailing ship. He was limited at practice today, but I would assume he's going to play. Gus carried the ball 10 times and averaged 5.5 yards per carry. This is the best he's looked all year by far. And J.K. Dobbins didn't look very good last week. J.K. had 15 carries for 50 yards. So he had more yards than J.K. did on 5 less touches. Like, that's not very good. And if you look back to the last several games, like, he hasn't actually been very good. So I have a little issue with JK. I do think he might be a little bit of a descending asset. So JK is not my favorite right now in fantasy. I have a feeling you could be left holding the bag. Whereas with Tillman, like, obviously AJ's a better asset moving forward than Tillman, but with Tillman, like, I don't feel left holding the bag with Cedric Tillman. Tillman's going to have, in my opinion, very sustainable fantasy upside. JK, I don't see that. So with Brees, like, I see sustainable upside for him too. I'm personally going to stick with Hall and Tillman on this one. Appreciate the super chat. William Barnes up next. Appreciate the super chat. Start 3 wide receivers and 3 running backs. Terry, Mooney, Wilson, and Hall, K9, Monty, and JT. Well, your 3 wide receivers, those are the only one that she listed, so kind of looks like you have to to go with that. Your 3 running backs. Yeah, you got to go with Terry, Mooney, and Wilson because there's only 3 that you listed. And then the running backs here, I would go with Jonathan Taylor for sure. I think the matchup versus the Jets is fantastic. I would also go with... I would go with Kenneth Walker. I think the upside with Kenneth is really big. So looking at it like this, like Jonathan Taylor, consistent, like we're going to get 15 fantasy points from him, if not more. Could be closer to 30, depending on, like if he hits in this Jets matchup, as he should, it could be closer to 30. So with Kenneth, like he's either going to boom or he's going to bust this week. I don't really see an in between because I do want to go back and show you guys really quick. His first game versus the 49ers was pretty crazy. Like, this is what he gave you versus 49ers. 16.9 fantasy points. Half PPR. Very good game. 14 carries for 32 yards. 1 touchdown. Obviously raises the upside. But he had 8 targets and 8 receptions in this game. That hasn't happened in any other week. He's a very consistent target getter. But getting 8 targets again, I don't see that. So, I think he's a big boomer bust play. So in order to kind of even that out, I'm going to personally go with Kenneth over Brees. Because, I'm going to go with Monty over Brees. I think Monty is a really safe play this week with upside that Brees I think has, but I don't think Brees has the floor that Monty has this week. With Brees, I think that his ceiling is obviously 25 points. Monty doesn't have that quite of a ceiling, but he's got close to that ceiling. But Monty's floor this week versus the Jags is really high. Like he's a touchdown lock. He's had 8 rushing touchdowns this year. He's a lock for this week for a touchdown for sure. So in order to counteract the potential boomer bust nature with Kenneth this week, I'll go with Kenneth, Monty, and JT at running back. Appreciate the super chat. Tyler Sperry. Yeah. Bateman. Okay, good deal. We got that. Tyler C. What's going on? Appreciate the super chat. 7-3, 10 team, 0.7 PPR. I like this kind of league. Start 3. St. Brown, Adams, Flowers, D-Hop, and Jennings. Well, you're obviously going to go with Amon-Ra. You can't sit Amon-Ra even in like a matchup like this. They're going to crush the Jags. Like, it won't be close. This game will be out of hand. It'll be like the Titans game several weeks back where they just obliterated the Titans. And it was over before halftime. Like, that game was over before halftime. Even in that game, Tennessee, like, he had 7.7 fantasy points. But, you know, most of the past, like, 2 months, like, he's only had 1 bust game, and that was that first game versus the Rams, where people had no idea what happened. So, yeah, I mean, it just kind of makes sense to never sit Amon-Ra. Like, you can't sit him. You cannot sit Amon-Ra St. Brown. Adams, Flowers, D-Hop, Jennings. You know, I'm going to play D-Hop this week. I think D-Hop, like, what we saw from D-Hop last week was encouraging in one sense. It was encouraging because he was able to get 56 yards on one of the toughest corner to play in the game. Like, that guy, Surtain's locked down everybody this year. Everybody. So, yeah, obviously, it was good to see that. And Buffalo is a better matchup. So, I'm going to go with D-Hop and definitely with Amon-Ra. So, it comes down to Devontae Adams, Flowers, and Jennings. You know, I will say this. I've been saying it all week, like I said earlier. That Ravens-Steelers game, it's going to become a slugfest, so do not be surprised when the score is like 20-17 or like 21-20 or something like that. Like, that's how these games go. But Flowers is obviously boom or bust. With D-Hop, I feel like I get a pretty safe floor. And with Amon-Ra, I feel like I get a pretty safe floor as well. I'm gonna go with the upside of Zay this week. I think that's what I'm going to do. Jennings is a close second. So if you have a gut feeling that Juwan Jennings is the better play, I've got no problem with you going with that. My gut's telling me Zay in this one. So I'll go Zay, I'll go Amon-Ra, and I will go with D-Hop as well. Because especially like the 0.7 PPR factor, like Zay will get probably some receptions in this game. So yeah, I'll go with Zay. Appreciate the super chat, Tyler. Luis Mendez up next. Appreciate the super chat. Estime, Najee, Eckler, Douglas, and Christian Watson. Pick 2 running backs and flex half PPR. Okay. My 2 running backs are going to be Najee and with Breece. With Brian Robinson Jr., I'm going to go with Estime over Eckler. I don't like this Eagles matchup. The matchup with the Eagles does not feel good to me at all. Eagles are pretty stout against the run, and especially with B-Rob back, he's going to have to rely on targets. Estime, like him or not, going to get carries this week, and I was listening to something interesting earlier in the week. I saw Sean Payton talking about Audric Estime, and he basically wasn't working with Javonte, obviously. So he was asked about, Audric Estime. How do you view this guy? And what he said about Audric Estime was, I view him as a first and second down back. Like, he views him as his future guy to handle the workload on first and second downs. So he's shifting more towards their future right now. So it's hard to trust, but with Eckler at this point, I just don't see the upside being super strong. So I'll go Najee and Estime for the running backs, and then flex in a half PPR format. Eckler, again, just doesn't entice me. Neither does Douglas. I'd go Eckler over Douglas. I think I'm probably going to go with... I think I'm going to go with Christian Watson, to be honest with you. Christian Watson obviously has been a disaster for most of the year, but, always the big play is there. His yards per reception is stupid because he doesn't get targeted that much, but he also gets high upside targets, and he has the potential to score. So it just kind of makes sense to me in a half PPR format with the options that you have, because you don't have, safe floor options. These are not guys with safe floors. You're not talking about Brian Robinson Jr. here, who I think has a safer floor than Eckler. You're talking about Eckler and Demario Douglas. These are not safe floor guys. These are low ceiling, low floor guys. With Watson, obviously low floor, but I'd rather take the higher upside than kicking it with 2 guys that don't have as high of an upside this week. So I'll go Watson in the flex. Appreciate the super chat. Roy's Killam, what's going on? Appreciate the super chat. Hill for Higgins and Aaron Jones. Wide receivers are Reed, CD, and BTJ. Yeah, I would do that in a heartbeat, for sure. T. Higgins, did he practice today? Let's see. T. Higgins. Returns to practice. I don't know if he was limited or what. Let's see if we can get a kind of a full, more accurate report. What? Okay, so he didn't practice. Okay, NBC. Friggin' fake news. So T. Higgins. Okay, I'm seeing conflicting reports. Did the guy frickin' practice today or not? Said he won't take practice today, but he's in line to take part in a walkthrough. So he didn't practice. He took part in a walkthrough. This one sucks. This one does suck. I mean, I would imagine like he'll be back. Like if it's not this week, it's got to be next week. They would have put him on the IR by now if he was gonna miss like a bunch of games, unless he's holding out. Like I remember I had this question before the start of the season. Like, was this guy holding out because he was pissed with his contract situation? I doubt it, because he's in the middle of trying to show out this year. But I mean, with Aaron Jones too, you're gonna get upside. The only problem with those guys, they're injured, but Tyreek's injured too. And Tyreek, like I said, doesn't have the ceiling of Aaron Jones or T. Higgins. When they both play, their ceiling is in like the 20s, 25s. Like that's what you can get from both those guys. But Tyreek, you can't get that. So I'm going to go with, I'll go with T. Higgins I'll go with T and Aaron Jones here. I would also try to sell away friggin' Brian Thomas Jr. as well. I've got no faith in him. Dakota Shutt, what's going on? Appreciate the super chat. Bench 1, Tillman, D-Hop, Devonta, or Swift? I'm going to have to go ahead and bench. You know what? I'm going to bench D-Hop, and I'll tell you why. It's between him and Swift. So Devonta, this game script makes sense to me because tomorrow night, Washington is beatable, obviously, through the pass. And number 2, I think it's going to be a more competitive game. If you look at the games that both Devonta and A.J. Brown have played, well, the problem has been that they've been, like, in those 2 games, they've crushed their opponents. So they don't need to throw to him later in the game. This one, I don't think they could get away with just, like, outright, like, I don't think they're just going to squash the Commanders like a bug tomorrow. I think it'll be competitive. So I'm going to play Devonta Smith. The reason I'm going to go with Swift over D-Hop is because this is a little bit of a gut call. They're close. So I'll tell you this. My gut kind of is telling me, like, you know, with them firing Shane Waldron, who, like, I have said it for weeks. I've actually discussed this for a long time. Shane Waldron, their former offensive coordinator now, he sucks. He sucks. Like, Jackson Smith-Njigba did an interview over the Super Bowl this past season, and, you know, Shane Waldron was the offensive coordinator in Seattle, and he was asked, like, you know, what do you think about, you know, what can you tell those guys in Chicago what to expect? And he was like, is this live? And they were like, yeah. And he was like, good luck. Like, he was, like, straight up just like, I don't like this guy. Basically, that's what he said. So, Waldron sucks. My thought on it this week is that with Swift, I think we might be able to get, like, a good offensive effort this week from everybody involved. And the one thing that's been clear this year is when Chicago has looked good offensively, they've had DeAndre Swift getting, like, 20 opportunities on a per-game basis. And he's been largely good when they do that. So I just kind of have a feeling there's going to be a better offensive effort this week. And I have a feeling that we're going to see them kind of just be better offensively entirely. And that definitely includes a Swift game. So this is a gut call from me. They're very close to my rankings this week. If you want to go with D-Hop, that's totally fine. But I'm definitely going to go with Swift because of my gut. That's what it's telling me this week. Appreciate the super chat. Dizzy B, what's going on? Appreciate the super chat. Gesicki still viable or Ferguson? I'll be honest with you. I was irritated with Gesicki last week because theoretically, like, everything was open for him, right? Like, no Eric All. He's done for the year. Their backup tight end that's been kind of a thorn in his side. And T. Higgins obviously missed as well. And it was the Ravens. Like, that was a good matchup to take advantage of. However, he was a total disappointment. And it irritated me because it was like, it was all there for you. But when you look back on it, like, it was not the worst thing that he could have done. That was not the worst performance that we got out of tight ends this week for sure. Like, in a half PPR, 5 fantasy points, but he had 9 targets, and he just only caught 4 of those passes for 30 yards. Like, he had 9 targets. Like, that's the important part to remember, is that you can see his game log right here. There's only been one other game where he's gotten as many as 9 targets, and that was in week 2 versus Kansas City. Like, he's still going to be viable, especially if T doesn't play this week. So, yeah, I mean, I think he's a better option than Ferguson. Like, Ferguson at this point, like, I've got no confidence in Ferguson at all. Like, I had very little confidence in him with Dak, to be honest with you. Like, he's been a massive disappointment this year. Ferguson has been a totally disappointing player. You know, I get it. He got 5 targets last week. Well, you know who got 10 targets and still was bad in fantasy? CeeDee freaking Lamb. Because they have... this is like XFL quarterback play, guys. What we're watching in Dallas is XFL quarterback play. Canadian Football League quarterback play. Arena Football League quarterback play. This is low-level stuff, man. Like, I just don't see upside with any pass catcher. The only way that I could see this giving me value is if they gave him a red zone target, but I don't know how freaking often they're going to be in the red zone, especially against the Texans. Yeah, I mean, to me personally, I prefer Gesicki. Honestly, I do. Like, at least he's getting 9 targets with an elite quarterback. Ferguson is getting 5 targets with Cooper Rush / Trey Lance. No freaking thank you. So I'd stick with Gesicki personally. Appreciate the super chat. Steve512, what's going on? Appreciate the super chat. Question above, thanks. Should I sit Drake London this week versus Denver? I have D-Hop, Jacoby, and DeAndre Swift. Yeah, I mean, it's easy to say to bench London this weekend, and I'm sure that you saw my wide receiver rankings yesterday. The matchup is terrible, obviously, and nobody put up a fight with it, honestly. I think I maybe saw like one comment someone put up a fight with it, but I think the majority of everybody understands that this matchup sucks, and you just kind of have to ride it out. You know, the thing with Drake London is that, like, he's been so good this year outside of that week 1 game versus the Steelers. Like, Drake London has been pretty dominant. And, you know, the worst game since then was that game against Tampa, but he was injured in that game as well. He left a little bit. So, you know, even if he gets in there and doesn't give you the greatest week, like, I would hate to look at you and tell you that I would play a guy like D-Hop, who I don't think has that level of upside. Like, you know, there is a chance, because the one guy, I'll say this, the one guy who beat Pat Surtain was actually George Pickens. And his fantasy stats won't show for it. Like, I'm sure when we look at it, like, George Pickens versus Denver had 3.9 fantasy points. I'm telling you guys, like, I watched that game, and he beat him several times deep, and Fields just couldn't hit him. One of them he actually did hit, and it was a massive, like, 60 to 70-point play, but he got called back because of a holding. But he had him beat several more times. He got a touchdown called back in that game as well. So, like, he's beatable by some of those types of receivers who are big play threats, like Drake London is. So I get it. Like, I'm not in love with London this week by any stretch of the imagination. But at the same time, like, I'm probably not going to tell you to bench him in most scenarios. I just don't think that those other options provide that same level of upside, to be honest with you. Appreciate the super chat. Roy's Killam, what's going on? Appreciate the super chat. Kicker, Aubrey or Bates? Bucker, Moody, McManus on waiver. So the kicker rankings will be out tomorrow, just so everybody here knows that. I mean, you know, the problem with Aubrey, as I said last week, is that his offense just sucks. Now, Aubrey did fine because, again, there's 2 positives that I can see with the Cowboys offense moving forward. Number 1, Aubrey's great. Like, Aubrey is not the question. The question here is, can they get the ball down to the freaking, like, just in range? Get him to the 40-yard line. That guy can kick a 60-yarder for sure. But the problem is that unless there's games where they're holding their opponents to, like, very few points, like, I just don't see a ton of opportunities for Brandon Aubrey. Like, I just think that he's going to get stymied. He's going to get stymied, not stiffied. I don't even know what that means. There's going to be times where he just gets his opportunities taken out from under him because they can't get down there because they're incompetent. With Bates, like, Bates has been actually pretty good. Like, I got to give it to Jake Bates. The Lions, I haven't really liked their kicker situation in years, and they usually go for it on fourth down, but they've been a little bit more smart this year about going for it, and that's given him a lot of good opportunities. Like, out of the bye week, this guy's been pretty dominant. Bates, this matchup versus Jacksonville doesn't feel like it's maybe, like, the best, because I think he's going to have no problem. Like, they're not going to have any problem kicking field goals, but that being said, like, he's going to get a lot of extra points. To me, Butker is probably the smartest play, but I'll tell you this, like, moving forward, I think Bates is probably the better option. That's what I would say. Bates is probably the better option moving forward, but this week, in all likelihood, I'll probably have Butker. As of right now, Butker is above Bates in my rankings this week, but, you know, that could change tonight before I film, so we'll have to see how I end up feeling about it. Appreciate the super chat. George Brennan, what's going on? Appreciate the super chat. With a must-win week, I traded B-Rob and Algier for Marvin Harrison Jr., Bucky, and MVS. Then traded MHJ, Lamb, and Chase Brown for Mixon and McLaurin. How do we feel about this trade? Okay, so you traded B-Rob. I'm assuming that means Brian Robinson, not Bijan Robinson. And Algier for Marvin, Bucky, and MVS. I guess Marvin's a better option than B-Rob, depending on... I'd probably prefer... Yeah, I don't know. That one's kind of tough. Marvin's a fine option. I think that's not the bad part. Sorry about that. Just saw something else pop up. So then you traded Marvin, Lamb, and Chase Brown for Mixon and McLaurin. Well, I think that's probably a good thing ultimately, because Mixon is obviously a top, like, as far as like where he stands like on the year, he's obviously not like a top 5, top 3 back, but that's where he rightfully is. Like, fantasy points per game would say that he's a top 3 back. He's actually the number 2 running back in fantasy points per game wise. So, like, he's been fantastic. I like that. And then obviously Terry's the top 5 wide receiver, and I think it's very sustainable. I guess the only problem I have with it is, like, what is your flexibility now? Because you did kind of go all in for 2 stars. So what does your flexibility look like? Because you already sent off Brian Robinson, who is, you know, you obviously upgraded a running back. You obviously probably upgraded a wide receiver, but the thing that worries me is the flexibility may not be there. Because you did send away Marvin and Lamb, who I don't love either, but they're both playable. You know, receivers are tough to find this year. Receivers are tough this year. There will be an extended video on that, like, during the offseason when I go through everything this year. The big one that stuck out to me so far is how desperate we've all been at wide receiver this year. So that's the only thing that worries me, but obviously getting 2 stars is fantastic. Appreciate the super chat. Michael Seg, what's going on? Appreciate the super chat. Start Drake London or Metcalf this week? I'd go with DK. Yeah, if DK plays, I'm going with DK. That's one where I can be okay sitting Drake London here. I mean, they're still kind of... I've read that they're optimistic. Okay, he was full practice day. Yeah, he should be fine. Yeah, he's probably going to end up practicing. So that's a good thing. I feel good about that. Yeah, if DK playing, makes me feel fine sitting Drake London. Because as I've said, like London's matchup, obviously I don't love. The only way I'm going to sit London realistically, though, is if I end up liking the option. You know, like I have to like the option and think that the upside is there. And I think it is with DK. So yeah, I played Metcalf this week. Appreciate the super chat. Jessica Lauren up next. Appreciate the super chat. 2 flex. Brian Robinson Jr.'s Jennings, Downs, JSN. Thanks. I will go with Jennings for one of them for sure. And I'll tell you this, like Brian Robinson still scares me. I don't think this is a good matchup for him. You know, the problem with Brian Robinson is that there's been several games. Obviously, like Brian Robinson has spent a lot of this year injured. Like he spent a lot of this year on the sidelines. And even when he plays, like he's not always like Mr. Snap Count. Like look at the first month of the season. Really solid numbers. When he was fully healthy, he was doing well in fantasy, obviously, and he was in a situation to where he was getting 56, 60, 76, 62% of the snaps. But then we start hearing word about the knee injury. It goes down to 34% of snaps. Then he misses week 6 versus Baltimore. Then he goes back against Carolina, has 38% of the snaps. And then he goes to 47. So, like, even when he's played with this injury, he hasn't been playing much. So, he has to be really efficient on all his work. And the Eagles are not a good matchup. So, to me, Brian Robinson, like, in a lot of ways this week, is a kind of a must-sit for me. He really kind of is. Like, obviously you play him over somebody like Alexander Madison or Tyler Algier. But if we're talking about your options right here, I'm playing every single one of these guys over Brian Robinson. So B-Rob's out. I'm playing Jennings because I think the matchup upside with Seattle's is excellent. And Jennings is going to be involved on a weekly basis. Like, Jennings could win you a league. Like, that's where I'm at with Jennings. He has league-winning upside. Between Downs and JSN, you know, this one's been close all week. And with Flacco, that's what put Downs over the edge. Now that it's Anthony Richardson, he drops back down for me. And I think JSN's the guy. Because here's the deal to look at, right? Obviously, JSN's going to be the number 2 target now that DK is back. Understandably, kind of puts a wet blanket on our dreams, right? Because coming off a massive game, like you want to play JSN, I get it. I'll be playing him in a dynasty league, but that's because I have deeper leagues. This week, obviously, he's going to get targets. Like, the targets aren't going anywhere. With Downs, the targets aren't going anywhere, but the efficiency is absolutely going to be bad. Like, Richardson has just flat out not been very good. That's just the reality. So, I mean, this is a Flacco game right here. 18.2. Flacco game. Flacco game. Anthony Richardson game. Anthony Richardson game. Flacco game, Flacco game. I think he was, yeah, Minnesota was a Flacco game. So one good game with Anthony Richardson this year. One. I just don't trust it. I don't trust his ability to hit Josh Downs. I simply do not trust this. So yeah, JSN just makes more sense to me. To take advantage of just the targets and just being able to convert on more targets than Josh Downs does. I'll go JSN, I'll go with Jennings, and I'll sit Brian Robinson and Josh Downs this week. Appreciate the super chat, Jessica. G Medina, what's going on? Good to see you in here. Appreciate the super chat. Trade Pacheco, Bucky, Downs for Jacobs to Hunt owner. Pacheco, Bucky, Downs for Jacobs to the Hunt owner. No, that's too much. That's too much to give for Josh Jacobs. Because Bucky and Downs are both playable every week. And you're obviously going to get a high-end RB2 when Pacheco starts playing again. Like, that's just too much, in my opinion. I'm fine. I'm all good with, like, if you were to be getting, like, Josh Jacobs, right? Josh Jacobs, solid RB2, without question. But if I'm giving up a high-end RB2 when he plays, a bottom-tier wide receiver 2 with Anthony Richardson, and a bottom-end RB2, like, I need closer to an RB1. Like, I need somebody I'd maybe do it for Chase Brown. I would probably do it. I would do it for Achane. I would do it for Brees. I would do it for James Cook. That's probably my short list, though. Like, that's not enough. I don't think Josh Jacobs is enough. Like, the Hunt owner should be offering you more because that's just too valuable. Like, he's going to lose 15 fantasy points per game when Kareem Hunt becomes the backup. That's a big deal. So they should be reaching out to you with much better offers. This is too low. You got to go for more on this one. You need to go for bigger, better RB upside. And that, to me, comes with guys like Brees, guys like James Cook, guys like Achane. That's just kind of how I feel about that. I just don't think giving up an RB2 to a guy who clearly needs him is going to be enough when you pair all those other guys for just Josh Jacobs. That doesn't make a bunch of sense. You need to get more. Appreciate the super chat. Jesse M, appreciate the super chat. See super chat, please. By the way, you told me to keep Tracy Jr. and not trade for Ingram earlier this year. Yeah, I mean, Tracy Jr., listen, I called him weeks ago. I think this guy could be a league winner. There's a couple of league-winning players that have emerged. I think of Cedric Tillman as one. I think of Juwan Jennings as one. I think of Tyrone Tracy Jr. as one. I mean, these were all guys who were waiver wire pickups at, various points during the season, and they're providing you upside, and it's very sustainable upside. So, I kind of saw that one earlier with Tyrone Tracy Jr. He was a player, believe it or not, one of my most drafted players on Underdog. Also, Chuba Hubbard, Tyrone Tracy, they were like two of my top 5 most drafted running backs in Underdog this year. Tyrone Tracy Jr., I liked him out of college, and, it just made sense to me with Devin Singletary. So it's good to see him finally get the opportunity. And Ingram, yeah, I mean, it's just, injured and older and has no Mac Jones now. So obviously it looks good now. But, yeah, I'm glad that we're looking good with this team right here. Appreciate the super chat, Jesse. Next up was Dizzy B. What's going on? Appreciate the super chat. Sorry to spam. Never apologize for asking a question, man. Amari Cooper over Jacoby Myers. No, I'd go Jacoby this week for sure. Jacoby's a good play. Jacoby's taking on the Rams. No, are they? I think I'm getting that wrong. No, they are. Yeah, Raiders, no. Raiders, Dolphins. Jalen Ramsey's not the greatest matchup, but with Amari, he's taking on a really tough Chiefs defense, and he's not fully healthy. He's still limited. This guy is definitely going through a major injury. I have no problem making that assessment right now. He's got a major injury he's dealing with. Who knows? It may be very similar to the Tyreek one. I mean, they said last week, he was limited all week of practice last week, but I read that he wasn't even, able to, raise his hands to catch a ball. It's affecting him. So, no, I would personally go with Jacoby Myers this week for sure. Appreciate the super chat. Next up, Steve12. What's going on? Steve512. Appreciate the super chat. Another London question above. Thanks again. Would you trade London for who versus Denver then bye week 12? Yeah, I mean, it doesn't make sense to trade London unless you're you need to win the next 2 games to make the playoffs. It does not make sense to do that if you're 8-2, 9-1, 7-3, or even 6-4. That doesn't make a lot of sense to do that. If you're 5-5 or 4-6 right now, and you're feeling that pressure of like, it's crunch time. Like, we've got to take a shot here to make sure that we lock up playoffs. Then it makes more sense because you need to win over the next 2 games. But that being said, you've got to go for it, man. Like, Drake London, to me, is a guy that you only sell if you're getting a Justin Jefferson or Jamar Chase or Nico Collins. Now, in that case, you're probably not going to be able to do the straight-up trade because people like those guys better. Understandably so. You're going to need to package someone else together. You're going to need to package somebody like a, you're going to need to definitely get somebody like a RB2 and like a potential flex player in that offer. Like, you need to definitely add in a player like Jamison Williams or, a Jacoby Myers type or a Ramondre, Bucky Irving, Rashad White type. But that's the only way I'm trading London, is if you're getting that clear upgrade. Because Jamar, do they have a week 12 bye? Yeah, I think the Bengals are on bye next week too, so that probably won't help you. Vikings have already had their bye. Texans are playing next week. I mean, if you got Nico Collins or Justin Jefferson, that's what I'd do. But you're gonna have to do something else as well. Appreciate the super chat. I just noticed I did not see the question that Jesse M asked, so I'm gonna go back to Jesse M really quick. Trade question: 5 and 5 need wins. My quarterbacks are Hurts and Purdy. RBs are Brian Robinson Jr., Tracy Jr., Bigsby, Ray Davis, and Benson. Looking to deal Purdy before the deadline this Friday. Looks like might only be able to get Jalen Warren. Need a RB this week for Tracy bye and B-Rob bye week 14. Purdy for Warren justifiable? So 5 and 5 you need wins. Quarterbacks are Hurts and Purdy. Brian Robinson Jr., Tyrone Tracy Jr., Bigsby, Ray Davis, and Benson. Ugh, I mean, Purdy for Warren sounds really overpaying. Warren just isn't, like, that just doesn't make sense to me. Like, you're going to be able to play B-Rob this week for sure, but obviously, I see your point. Like, you need another running back. We can do better than that, though. I mean, Jalen Warren, like, if you can get, like, how about proposing something like this? Try to get Kareem Hunt. Because Kareem Hunt is somebody that is going to get you wins in the short term. Like, yeah, Pacheco's coming back, but, like, Kareem Hunt's going to play this week. He'll get you a win. And may play next week. Try getting a Tyrone Tracy Jr. Tyrone Tracy Jr. is RB 30 in fantasy right now. He's averaging 9.1 fantasy points per game. I would try to get, Tony Pollard maybe. See if someone's kind of reeling from the Tajay split. So, yeah, I mean, Warren just doesn't provide tons of upside. It's not, I wouldn't definitely say no. Because Warren, since being back, is getting more volume, and it makes sense in some levels here. But I would try to go for the other guys I just named beforehand. And if you can't do that, then I would try to, Purdy for Warren I think is fine since you're in kind of this desperation spot a little bit. Appreciate the super chat, Jesse. Sorry I didn't see that the first time. Okay, back on track. Adrian Mitchell, what's going on? Appreciate the super chat. Should I give up on Love already? I want to scoop up Russ, and I already have Baker on the bench. Also, Jennings, Metcalf, or Reed this week. So here's a personal anecdote. I actually have Love and Baker both on a dynasty team. Like, I have been starting Love all year, and honestly, it's kind of affected my outcome sometimes because I've just kind of bullheadedly kept playing Jordan Love and left Baker and massive production on the bench. Now, the good thing with Jordan Love is that when he hits big. Like, Jordan Love is a boomer bust player. So Jordan Love is not like all of a sudden just some bum. Like this game that he had against Detroit, don't take that as like an indictment. Like that was a rainy game and he's injured. And Jacksonville, that game, he left early as well, and he was been injured. Obviously, the problem becomes like, does the injury affect him all year? Let's see what Jordan Love's status is as of right now. Full practice Wednesday. I mean, here's the deal. I have a feeling that for the rest of the season, I think we're going to deal with injuries with Jordan Love. I don't think this is going away. But here's what I'll say about this. Jordan Love's upside is going to be higher than I think Russ's will in the future. Like, I just want to read something really quick. Like, obviously, Russ has had a couple good games in fantasy. 24.9 against the Jets and 19.1 against the Commanders. Good weeks. Really good weeks. His upcoming matchups, Baltimore, Cleveland, Cincinnati, Cleveland, they all are green. But I'm telling you, this Baltimore one is going to be a little bit rough. I'm telling you that. This one is a ground and pound game, and there's low scoring. This is not as good as it looks. These divisional matchups are different. Cincinnati and Cleveland, toss-ups he might do well in. I could see him doing well in Cincinnati particularly. But then he gets Philadelphia, Baltimore, and Kansas City. So, like, I'm just kind of... I want to lay this out to you long-term because long-term, I think Jordan Love's the better option than Russ is. Like, I don't think that Russ is the better option. And you have to understand about Love, like, if you drop him, someone's picking him up, for sure. So, I think it's just a little too soon to give up on Jordan Love. Love's upside is through the freaking roof. His upside's through the freaking roof. So, you know, if he's more mobile this week and the O-line can protect him enough, like the guy has 30 to 35 point ceilings. And I don't think that Russ will have that moving forward. So, like, I'm personally going to hold on to Jordan Love. Jennings, Metcalf, or Reed this week. I would go with DK. DK and Reed are close. DK, the matchup is better against the 49ers, slightly. And I think that DK's target share will be there rather than Jaden Reed, who's more of a... Jaden Reed's obviously more of a big play threat. Like, he needs to hit big plays in order to get the upside. Appreciate the super chat. Demetrios, what's going on, man? Good to see you in here. Hey, man, Gus or Algier or Estime? Start one. Yeah, this week I'll go with Estime. Gus is, first of all, like I said earlier, I don't know if everybody saw it here. People who are new may not have seen this yet. Gus Edwards was limited in practice today, guys. So he's still not clean. Like, he's still not looking clean. And last week definitely worried me for JK, but that doesn't mean that I'm all ready to jump back in on Gus Edwards. I'm not ready to do that personally. Algier is in the same boat as Gus, whereas with Estime just makes more sense because he's going to handle the backfield this week. You know, versus the Broncos taking on the Bengals, the Falcons. Like that, I like that matchup. Like, the matchup's good, and he's in line to handle the most work. So I'd go with Estime. Appreciate the super chat. Always good to see you, Demetrios. Bruce Caldry, what's going on? Appreciate the super chat. Please rank for full PPR. Jennings, Tillman, Myers. Tight ends, Andrews, Henry, or Jonnu Smith, or Knox if Kincaid is out. So Jennings, Tillman, and Myers. This week I'd go Tillman. Then I'd go Jennings ever so slightly above Myers because I like Jennings' matchup a lot this week. The matchup with Jacoby Myers, he's got Jalen Ramsey this week, so that's not the best matchup. But just based on targets, he'll get more than Jennings. But Jennings is taking on Seattle, who has been really hit or miss this year defensively because they've been dealing with so many injuries. So, yeah, Tillman's the clear number one for me for sure because the big play upside is there. And it's more than just big play upside. The guy is very, very, very much the reliable number one target. So, yeah, that one is definitely going to be a Tillman, Jennings, and Myers ranking. Tight ends, Andrews is still at number 1 for me because Andrews has really come back to shine. I mean, Andrews has come through. I think, honestly, I really do think that the majority of the first month of the year was him definitely being affected by that car crash. I really do think so. But look at that since then. Since week 5, 7.5, 14.1, 18.1, 12.1, 3.6, 15.8. Like, he's been good again in fantasy. So, Andrews is my number 1. If Kincaid is out, what did Henry do last week? I'm kind of curious. I forgot. Henry was bad last week. 4 catches, a yard, four targets, 1 reception. But he did play Chicago. That's not good. You know, I think that if Kincaid is out, I'll go with Knox as number 3 behind Henry, and I'll go with Jonnu Smith at 4. Because Jonnu is, he has a role in Miami's offense for sure, but it's not like, I don't count on it every single week, to be honest. Like, and I get it. Like, you know, I might not be smart for doing that because he's been getting 4 targets, 7 targets out of the bye week. With Tyreek, like, maybe it is more stable than I think. Maybe so. But I do know that Dawson Knox is also going to be utilized as well through the passing game. So I'll go with Andrews, Henry, Knox, then Jonnu. And Jonnu's like really close to him. They're in the same tier. But I do prefer Knox over Jonnu ever so slightly. Appreciate the super chat. Nate Dogg, what's going on, man? Good to see you in here tonight. Drop Pittman, pick 2. Moore, Najee, Ertz, Dobbs, Lockett. So with Pittman, it all just kind of depends on what's out there. Like, I don't have a problem with dropping Pittman. Like, that's the one thing I will say is, like, if you have a guy you have a lot of conviction on out there on the waivers, or if there's just a clear pickup that makes tons of sense for your team, like, I've got no issue dropping Michael Pittman. Pittman at this point, like, I think it's just kind of a lost season for Pittman. Full participant in practice. That doesn't make a difference to me. Like, this injury, do not forget this. Like, they were talking originally about this injury as if, like, he was about to get placed on IR and have back surgery. Like, and then it went from that to, like, no, he's going to tough it out. It's like, this isn't going away, first of all. Second of all, with Anthony Richardson, upside is non-existent. Non-existent. So, with Pittman, it's just kind of a lost year. Like, I'm totally fine with dropping him and letting somebody else take the shot on him and get disappointed. Totally fine with it. So with Pittman, I'm totally okay with just kind of like waving by and, you know, saluting him for at least trying because nobody can really do much with Anthony Richardson. So it just depends. Like, don't drop him just to drop him, but definitely drop him if there's somebody you want. And he's the guy that you need to give up. No issue with doing that. More Najee, Ertz, Dobbs, Lockett. Pick 2. I will go with I'll go with Najee and I'll go with Romeo Dobbs this week. Yeah, Romeo's a better player than DJ. Dude, this is a problem. Like, I want to just kind of, since we're on the DJ Moore topic, I want to tell you guys why I have almost no hope as well for DJ Moore. Like, honestly, DJ Moore might be droppable as well. I'm not telling you guys to go drop him, but I want to just go through something really quick. So, obviously, you know, with Shane Waldron, when that report dropped that he had been fired yesterday, there was a popular radio show by former players in the Chicago area that dropped a report that I saw yesterday, and I found it really interesting. So essentially, when they were discussing like the Shane Waldron firing, it said that there had been multiple players like that came up to Eberflus and Ryan Poles, the GM, the day after the game, and they were like, "We've got to make a change." So they weren't planning on firing Waldron until the players came up and said, "We've got to make something happen." Also, in that report was that there has been several veteran players that have privately requested to coaches for Tyson Bagent to start over Caleb. And you know who I immediately thought of? It's DJ Moore. DJ Moore, like, not only the numbers speak for themselves. Like, just look at what DJ Moore has done this year. It has been one boom game, and not just like, oh, there's some disappointment in there. No, DJ Moore has had one boom game, and every other game has been a colossal failure. That first month, he had some fine games. Since that big game, colossal failure. And it's not just, again, it's not just numbers. Like, I watched this guy in games with Caleb. He looks perpetually pissed. Because he can't, like, Caleb is not doing well. So, to me right now, like, DJ Moore is a permanent bench at the very least, and I have considered dropping him if I don't have him in any redraft leagues, luckily, because I would hate to deal with this. Like, it is a nightmare with DJ Moore right now. Najee's definitely a start, and yeah, I'm going to go with Dobbs over DJ Moore. Dobbs is more upside and a better quarterback to play with. Appreciate the super chat, Nate Tugg. Always good to see you. Probably not the best thing to hear as a Bears fan, but this is the truth, man. It's rough. It's rough right now. Next up was Jesse M. What's going on? Appreciate the super chat. Please see trade question in chat. Yep, we got to that one. Richard Cranium. What's going on? Appreciate the super chat. Hey, man, my wide receivers feel so inconsistent. Hill, Debo, and Reed. Stick with them or trade any for a better floor. My quarterbacks, running backs, and tight ends are solid. Thanks. Yeah, I mean, the guy that I'm definitely on board with selling is Tyreek. Tyreek Hill is the guy I'd want to sell. I'm fine with keeping Debo and Jaden because Debo's still getting volume that matters, and he still has the upside. And I did say earlier in the week, like, I do worry about Debo hitting the upside sometimes because, like, he's injured too, but I don't worry about it as much as I do with Tyreek. With Jaden, he can hit it. Like, people are really upset with Jaden right now. Just wait until he has a 30-point game. Like, it's coming. It will come. It's going to come. And so I'm not giving up on Jaden Reed. Like, Jaden Reed is still a top-tier player, in my opinion. I'm fine with trading Tyreek Hill for a safer floor. I mean, you could easily try to get, like, a Mike Evans out of him. Because Mike Evans is indicated to be returning next week when they're off the bye. I'm fine with getting a guy like, you know, if you could get a Nico, that'd be fantastic. If you could get a Terry McLaurin, that'd be fantastic. If you could get a Amon-Ra St. Brown, you probably won't be able to, but if you could, that'd be fantastic. Like, yeah, I'm definitely on board with trading Tyreek Hill. 100%. Appreciate the super chat. RM Laughlin, what's going on? Appreciate the super chat. Half PPR, Jaden Daniels, Bijan, Swift, Tracy, Nico, Dell, Waddle, Pearsall, Laporta, Muth. Trade Jaden Daniels, Bijan, and Algier for Mahomes, Walker, and MHJ or Neighbors. Well, you're getting a massive downgrade at quarterback, so I don't like that. You're getting a downgrade kind of everywhere. I mean, I get it. Like, you want another wide receiver. Your receivers right now, Nico, Dell, and Waddle, like, and Pearsall, like, you have fine receivers. Like, throwing Marvin in there, like, doesn't really improve anything for me. You know what I'm saying? Like, I get it. Obviously, Nico's your best guy right now. And Pearsall, I think, is becoming, like, your wide receiver too. But to me, like, it doesn't make a lot of sense to move off of Bijan. Because the point differential that he gives you compared to what Marvin can give you is significant. So it doesn't really make a ton of sense to do this to me, especially when you're giving up more points at quarterback. So, like, you're losing out on, like, 8 to 10 points a week, in my opinion. Because, like, obviously Kenneth is great. And, like, he's been really great as well. But, like, he doesn't have Bijan's consistency. And with Marvin, like, he's going to continue to boom or bust. That's not the question. It's just going to be when does he hit and when does he not. Now, I wouldn't do this trade personally. It doesn't make a lot of team sense to me to do this trade. I'd hang. Appreciate the super chat. Luka Magic, what's going on? Appreciate the super chat. Who should I trade Achane and Lamb for? If you're combining the two of them, yeah, if you're combining the two of those guys, then you should be shooting for big upside. You could go on one hand and, losing out on CD, I'm assuming that you're going to take a massive hit at wide receiver. So you probably don't want to just go all in on an elite running back because you'll lose 2 starter players. So what I would personally do is probably try to get a deal done like Jamar Chase and, Aaron Jones, or Jamar Chase and Josh Jacobs, Jamar Chase and DeAndre Swift, or Jonathan Taylor. And that's what I would do. Jamar Chase and, like, a combination of that, because you'd be able to replace Achane with solid, consistent upside, and you're obviously going to upgrade a wide receiver big time. Or you could go the opposite route. And you could go with, it probably wouldn't work in the opposite way, though. That's the thing. If you want to go for big air and you want to go for a running back, like, you may be able to get away with, like, Alvin Kamara. Like, combining Achane and Lamb for Alvin Kamara, Saquon Barkley, Bijan, Gibbs, Kyron, like, Mixon, like, that would make sense, too. But for team construction purposes, I'm be willing to bet that your wide receivers are going to take a big hit without CD. Like, even though CD sucks, like, and he's not really helping you right now anyways, it will still leave a massive void in your wide receiver slot on a weekly basis. I'm assuming that's the case. So you're probably going to want to replace him with a wide receiver that's viable. So that's where I would lean more towards, like, go for big air at the wide receiver position. Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson, Nico Collins. Those are the guys that I would try to target and get a solid RB2 that can kind of hold up the water that Achane will be leaving behind. Appreciate the super chat. Oh, you mean separately? Okay, yeah, separately, with Achane, like, Achane, I don't really think you'd be in a right position to trade Achane. Like, if you traded Achane for Gibbs, like, that may be more beneficial. I think Gibbs is probably the more consistent option. If you traded him for Kyron, it might make sense. If you traded him for Bijan, those are all guys that I prefer in my rest of season rankings. But, Achane, like, he's gonna be really solid. So you'd be able to get a top 5 back trading for Achane for sure. And then with wide receivers, trading CD is the big question. I think a lot of people are kind of off on CD. So, like, your best bet would try to get somebody like a Zay Flowers, a Zay Flowers, a Jaden Reed, Darnell Mooney's in there too. Getting you could probably get Malik Neighbors, I would bet. You could probably get Pickens, Marvin Harrison Jr. That's what I would personally do. Is, like, you want to shoot for, like, the bigger upside. If you can get away with getting a Terry McLaurin, a Drake London, or a Garrett Wilson, like, knock yourself out. That's the best move. The next tier of guys I'd be looking at is Jaden, Zay, Mooney, and if you can't get one of those guys, Malik Neighbors, Marvin Harrison Jr., George Pickens. That's kind of the direction you probably want to go into for those guys. Appreciate the super chat. Next up, we have Nate Dogg, what's going on, man? Appreciate the super chat. Drop Pittman for Douglas, Quinton, Ford, Estime, or does anyone else catch your eye? Yeah, I mean, to me, Quinn Johnston is the guy I would do it for. Estime makes sense as well, because Estime moving forward theoretically becomes the running back one in Denver. Listen, the way I view Denver is I don't see upside in this backfield. Period. End of story. Like, Estime's first game as the guy, quote unquote, for the Broncos wasn't that good. Audric Estime, where are you? Estime last week, 5.3 fantasy points, 14 carries, 53 yards. Averaged 3.8 yards per carry. Like, that's not much better than when Javonte and McLaughlin have got us this year. So, like, the guy I want to go for is the guy who has clear upside. Johnston, at this point, is a better option than Pittman is to me. Like, he's ahead of Pittman in my rest of season rankings at this point. Quinn Johnston is the guy who would do it. Like, I would actually do that right now. Like, I would do that today. Drop Michael Pittman for Quentin Johnston. I mean, Pittman makes no sense with Anthony Richardson. He has zero upside with Anthony Richardson. Pittman with Richardson this year, 5.1, 3.6, 5.6, 14.3, that's a Flacco game. 12.2, that's a Flacco game. 11.0, that's a Flacco game. Back to Anthony Richardson, 7.8 fantasy points. Flacco. Like, he has no upside with A-Rich. So, yeah, I would go with Quinn Johnston. Quinn Johnston has actually established a consistent role in this offense. While he doesn't get a ton of targets, well, Pittman gets a bunch, and he doesn't do anything with them because he can't. Quinn Johnston has a much better quarterback who can deliver those strikes, and he has the touchdown upside. Like, they use him in the red zone in big plays. So, yeah, Quinn Johnston, I would do that today. I would drop Pittman for him today. Appreciate the super chat, Nate Dogg. Nino Penta, what's going on? Pena, what's going on? Appreciate the super chat. Trade Chase Brown and Ingram for Connor and Otten for the playoffs. So obviously I really like Connor for the playoffs. Connor was on the video I made a week ago at this point where I was discussing players that I want for the playoffs. And I still like him for the playoffs. Like, there's nothing has changed about that. The one thing that's changed in regards to Connor particularly is that I don't, like, the one problem I have is that they're getting Benson more involved. Trey Benson, their rookie running back, and he's looking good. And it's not, like, I don't have a fear that he takes over the backfield necessarily. The problem I have is that Connor usually misses a couple games due to injury every single year, and Benson may just start outperforming him to where they kind of have to, like, start splitting the backfield. The good thing that Connor's always had in his benefit is no competition. And, like, just a couple weeks ago, he didn't have competition. Like, Benson was not realistically looking like he was taking legitimate volume. So right now, like, I feel better about Chase Brown, to be honest with you. Like, Chase Brown, now that he's the RB1 in Cincy, high upside offense, high upside player. I think I'd prefer Chase Brown at this point. And again, I'm not sour on James Conner all of a sudden. I like him a lot. But Conner at this point, like, I don't think he has the more consistent, I don't think he has the bigger ceiling than Chase Brown does. And honestly, we could argue he may not have the floor that Chase Brown has. Conner, the past several weeks, like, been good still, but last week, touchdown saved his week. So, you know, there's been a couple, like the Miami game, touchdown saved his week as well. So, you know, that he's a little concerning. Again, not off of Connor, not digging on him, not dogging him. I like him. The only thing that could sway me here is Otten. Otten, I prefer him over Ingram for sure. Yeah, I'd probably do it because of the odd factor. Chase Brown and Connor, I view them as both good options, but I would go with Otton over Ingram for sure. So yeah, I'll take that trade just because the Otton factor separates it for me. Appreciate the super chat. All right, we'll take a couple more questions, then we'll go ahead and wrap it up for the night. Like the video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already, guys. Really appreciate y'all's support. All right, let's go back up to the top. Let's just work our way from top to bottom. We'll answer a couple more questions. Start around here. Deeds for Glory 7. What's going on? Trade London, Aaron Jones, Amari for Tillman, Connor, and Pacheco. London, Aaron Jones, Amari for Tillman, Connor, and Pacheco. Yeah, I would do that. Yeah, I mean, obviously missing out on London will suck. But I do truly believe that Tillman will be able to. Like, Tillman's not going to make you feel it as bad as it could be. That may be a controversial statement. I don't really care. Like, he's going to be fine. He's going to be just fine. So, I'm fine with doing that. Connor and Pacheco are what puts it over the top for me, though. Because I prefer both of Connor and Pacheco long-term over Aaron Jones. And definitely over Amari. So, yeah, I would do that trade personally. I get it, like, the Tillman factor, like, makes you sketched out. Obviously, giving up London for Tillman, it's like, can you really trust Tillman? I can trust Tillman. So, yeah, I would do this trade personally. Kashaw for Wordo. What's going on? Start 3 full PPR. Cup, DK, Flowers, Tillman, Dell. Full PPR, I would personally go with... I'd go with Cup. I would go with DK, and I would go with Tillman. All big play upsides, and also all of them are just better floors, I think, than Flowers and Dell. William Craig, should I start Tillman over CD? I would. Yeah, I would definitely start Tillman over CD. Makes tons of sense. CD has no upside. Honestly, like I'm telling you guys, the only way CD Lamb has upside moving forward is if he gets 15 freaking targets. Like, that guy needs to get absolutely peppered with targets. There's no other path forward. We saw 10 targets last week. That didn't work. He needs to get peppered with 15 plus. It's bad. Tillman has got tons of upside on the other hand. And then we'll end it off with Farts McGee. That's a great way to end the night. I think it's perfect. 2 flex spots. Pearsall, QJ, and Higgins. I will go with T if he plays, and I will go with Ricky Pearsall over QJ. QJ, I love him. I really liked his rise this year. I predicted it, actually. I've been kind of spot on, basically. The entire step of the way with Quentin Johnston. Those of you who were with me when I had 2,000 subscribers, you know I was spot on with QJ. So, but Ricky Pearsall is just the more consistent role and just gets more consistent targets that you can count on rather than just big plays and very minimal amount of work that Quentin Johnston does. So Pearsall and T. Higgins if he plays. We'll wrap it up tonight, guys. Appreciate y'all being in here. Appreciate every single one of you guys. Kicker rankings tomorrow and must-sits tomorrow as well. Like the video. Subscribe to the channel on your way out. And I'll see you guys on tomorrow's videos. Peace out. Have a good rest of your night.